It's grey and cold outside again, even though the calendar is screaming that it's high time we started planting, right? Sound familiar? It really feels like spring decided to take a vacation this year, and all our gardening plans are going completely sideways. This is especially painful when it comes to cucumbers, because those seedlings absolutely hate waiting around. And here is the main dilemma every gardener faces. What should we do? Do we plant now, risking those leggy, weak giraffes on our windowsill? Or do we wait for the warmth, fearing we'll miss that precious window and end up with no harvest? Take a deep breath. In this video, I'm not just going to give you a piece of advice. I'm giving you a clear, foolproof calculation formula. You'll learn exactly how to determine the perfect day to start your cucumber seeds for your specific region and weather patterns. And I promise you, this method is so simple, you'll never second-guess yourself again. So if you want guaranteed crunchy cucumbers this summer, make sure you watch until the end. Before we dive into the math, let's take a quick minute to understand why timing is so crucial for cucumbers. By nature, the cucumber is a southern diva, a short-day plant that absolutely loves warmth. Its root system is extremely sensitive to cold, and the seedlings react very badly to overstaying their welcome in a small pot. Many people think that the older and larger the seedling is by transplant time, the better, but this is actually the most dangerous misconception. Imagine an athlete who is kept on the sidelines for too long. They lose their edge, become sluggish, and can't perform at their peak. The same thing happens to cucumber seedlings. An overgrown seedling means a stretched out stem, weak roots, and yellowing lower leaves. This kind of plant experiences massive transplant shock, takes a long time to recover, and ultimately falls far behind its younger but stronger counterparts in terms of growth and fruiting. Our goal is to plant not an overgrown giant, but a vigorous, energized teenager that is ready to bolt into growth immediately. That is why calculating the timing correctly is already half the battle won for your future harvest. So, here is the main secret you need to lock into your mind right now. We do not start with the current date. Instead, we work backward. This technique is called the reverse planning method. What does that mean? First, we pinpoint the estimated date when we plan to transplant our seedlings into the ground or greenhouse. Then, we simply subtract the necessary number of days required for those seedlings to grow. It sounds straightforward, but all the success lies in accurately determining that final target date. Forget the advice from your neighbour who always plants by the 1st of May. When spring is delayed, that calendar-based approach is a pure gamble with very low odds of success. We need a system based not on the calendar, but on actual, real-world weather conditions. So the first thing we do is stop looking at the calendar and start paying attention to the long-range forecast and the thermometer. Our true starting point is not May 1st or June 10th, but the specific day when the conditions for crops, like cucumbers, become truly ideal. And in the upcoming segments, we will break down exactly how to find that perfect moment. Let's start by pinpointing the most crucial factor that dictates all our subsequent steps, the ideal age of cucumber seedlings ready for transplanting into their permanent beds. Commit this number to memory: 25 to 30 days. Not 40, not 50. It must be 25 to 30 days. What exactly defines the perfect specimen at this age? It should be a strong, stocky, and compact plant standing roughly 20 to 25 centimeters tall. It needs short internodes, meaning the spacing between the leaf sets should be minimal. The stem must be thick, sturdy, and dark green. The plant should have 3 to 5 true, well-developed leaves of a deep, saturated colour. The root system should completely, but not excessively tightly, encompass the soil block in the container. If you gently remove the seedling, the root ball should stay intact, and the roots themselves must be white and healthy. Some early maturing hybrids might even begin setting their first buds at this age. That is an excellent sign. A robust seedling like this, a true powerhouse, will handle transplant shock almost seamlessly and immediately take off. If your seedlings are older than 35 days, they are generally considered overgrown. Let's talk now about the gardener's greatest enemy during a long, drawn-out spring: impatience. That urge to sow seeds as soon as the calendar flips over leads to the single most common, fatal mistake: planting too early. What exactly happens when you sow cucumbers in February or early March only to find that spring is dragging its feet? Your seedlings sprout, and immediately they cry out for light and room to grow. But what do they get instead? Cloudy skies, short daylight hours, a cramped windowsill, and scorching heat radiating from the radiator below. These are the perfect conditions for etiolation, or stretching. The plant instinctively strains toward the meagre light it can find, pouring all its limited energy into lengthening the stem instead of focusing on robust root structure and strong leaves. The result is what we call the classic giraffe seedling, a long, thin, pale stem crowned with just a couple of tiny leaves. This type of plant is extremely vulnerable. It snaps easily, is highly susceptible to diseases like damping off, and its root system remains weak and undeveloped. Even if this stressed seedling survives long enough to be transplanted outside, it will take ages to adapt and recover. You'll lose a minimum of 2 or 3 precious weeks waiting for it to stabilize. And that, ultimately, is a direct path to sacrificing a significant portion of your hard-earned harvest. Okay, so we've decided to hold off a bit, but how do we actually know if spring is genuinely delayed? Where is that line where a normal cool spell turns into a weather anomaly? We need to look at several key indicators, not just rely on our gut feeling. First, check the soil temperature. Cucumbers should only be planted once the soil, at a depth of 4 to 6 inches, has warmed up to at least 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. Not the air temperature, the soil. This distinction is absolutely critical. Secondly, monitor the average daily air temperature. It needs to consistently stay above 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and nighttime lows shouldn't dip below 50 to 53 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. Short cold snaps aren't as damaging as prolonged periods of chill. Thirdly, analyze the long-range forecast for the next 2 or 3 weeks. If meteorologists are predicting a sudden return of frost or prolonged cold rainy spells, that's a clear sign you need to postpone planting. And finally, don't ignore folk wisdom. These natural signs often hold true. For instance, the vigorous blooming of dandelions and bird cherry trees usually indicates that the soil is sufficiently warm. If these key factors don't align with the calendar dates, then spring is definitely running late. One of the most critical factors you absolutely cannot ignore is your region. Advice for a gardener in the warm Krasnodar region will be completely useless, potentially even detrimental, for someone gardening in Siberia or the Urals. Russia is a vast country with incredibly diverse climatic zones. That's why the first thing you must do is clearly understand the specific climate features of your local area. The key indicator is the date of the average last spring frost. This information is readily available online for almost any locality. This is your baseline starting point, but there's a crucial caveat. In a year with a prolonged or late spring, you need to factor in an additional week, maybe even 2, onto that average date. For instance, if your region's last average frost is typically May 20th, then during a cold spring, you should aim for early June instead. There is no universal planting date that applies to everyone. This is precisely why it's vital not to blindly copy someone else's schedule, but instead to thoroughly analyze the conditions of your own specific plot. A resident of the Moscow region, a gardener in the Urals, and a Darka owner in the Leningrad region will all be planting their cucumbers at entirely different times, even if they are using the exact same variety. The next crucial decision that splits all gardeners into 2 camps is where the seedlings will ultimately go: open ground or the greenhouse. This single choice dictates all our timing and calculations. A greenhouse, even an unheated basic structure, is a massive advantage. It provides crucial protection from wind, cold nights, and creates its own beneficial microclimate. On average, the soil and air inside a greenhouse warm up 2 to 3 weeks earlier than outdoors. And if you have a heated greenhouse, You essentially eliminate the uncertainty of unpredictable weather altogether. Open ground, however, is a completely different story. Here, your plants are entirely at the mercy of nature. They are exposed to wind, rain, and sudden temperature swings. Because of this, the optimal planting dates for the greenhouse versus the outdoors can differ by almost a month. This means you must start your seeds for these two locations at separate times. Never sow all your seeds on the same day if you plan to grow part of your crop outside and part in the greenhouse. Start the seeds for the greenhouse earlier and those destined for the open ground significantly later. Otherwise, you risk having perfect, ready-to-plant seedlings that simply die off waiting for the outdoor beds to finally warm up enough for transplanting. Now let's put it all together and figure out exactly when we should sow seeds for outdoor planting. The algorithm is very simple. Step 1. We need to find the average date of the last spring frost for your specific region online. For example, in the Moscow suburbs, that's usually around the 20th of May. Step 2. Since we might be dealing with an unusually cold spring, we add a safety buffer to that date, a minimum of 10 to 14 days. That gives us the approximate transplanting date. Early June, let's say between the 5th and the 10th. This is the day when our seedlings should actually go into the garden bed. Step 3. Starting from that final date. Let's use June 7th as our example. We count backward the ideal age of the seedlings. We remember that they should be 25 to 30 days old. We'll take the average, 28 days. Now count back 28 days from June 7th. That brings us to May 10th. This is your perfect day for sowing seeds indoors to start your transplants. And step 4, which is optional but highly recommended. Add another 3 to 5 days for seed germination. This means you can start soaking and preparing your seeds as early as May 5th through 7th. As you can see, there's no magic involved, just simple arithmetic. The key is setting that final outdoor planting date correctly. Now let's run the same calculation for the greenhouse. This part is actually a bit easier and more straightforward. If you have a standard polycarbonate greenhouse without supplemental heating, you can confidently subtract 2 to 3 weeks from the date you calculated for outdoor planting. So, if we determine June 7th for the outdoor garden, you could put your seedlings into the greenhouse as early as mid-May. Say the 15th. The soil warms up significantly faster in an enclosed structure. Now we apply our countdown method. We subtract the same 28 days from May 15th. That gives us the date, April 17th. That's the day you need to sow your cucumbers for the greenhouse. Can you see the difference? May 10th for the garden versus April 17th for the greenhouse. That's nearly a month's difference. However, if you have a greenhouse with supplemental heating for the soil or air, you can start the season much earlier. For example, you could transplant your seedlings in late April, meaning you'd need to sow them in late March. But it's crucial to remember that in early spring, sunlight is still very limited. Therefore, without quality grow lights, you won't be able to grow robust, healthy seedlings. We've touched on soil temperature already, but let's dive deeper because it's arguably the most crucial factor in successful growing. You can look at the calendar and the air temperature all you want, but if the soil is cold, your cucumbers simply won't thrive. The cucumber's roots are its most vulnerable point. They stop absorbing water and nutrients if the soil temperature drops below 14 to 15 degrees Celsius. The plant essentially stalls out or goes dormant. If that temperature falls further, say down to 10 degrees Celsius, the roots can begin to die back and rot. This explains why seedlings planted into cold soil often turn yellow, wilt, and eventually perish, even when the sun is shining brightly overhead. So, how do you measure this temperature? The most reliable tool is a dedicated soil thermometer. Stick it 10 to 15 centimeters deep into the soil and check the reading. If you don't have a thermometer, you can rely on the old-school method. Dig a hole about the depth of a spade blade and stick your hand in. If it feels comfortable, not cold or chilly, the ground is likely warm enough. And here's a quick tip. To speed up the warming process, Cover your garden bed with black plastic mulch a couple of weeks before planting. It naturally absorbs and traps the sun's heat, helping the soil warm up much faster. But what if you're watching this video too late and you've already made the classic mistake of starting your cucumbers way too early? Is it a total loss? Don't panic. You still have a chance to salvage the situation. Our main goal is to artificially slow down the growth of the seedlings, preventing them from getting too leggy. How do we do this? First and foremost, drop the temperature. If those seedlings are baking on a hot windowsill right over a radiator, you need to urgently find them a cooler spot. The ideal temperature for this growth slowdown is 61 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 to 18 Celsius during the day, and 57 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 14 to 15 Celsius at night. Maybe a cool sunroom or enclosed porch would work. Second, cut back drastically on watering. Only water the seedlings when the soil is almost completely dry. A slight moisture deficit also helps slow down that vigorous growth. Third, maximize light exposure. If you don't have a dedicated grow light, place the trays on your sunniest, south-facing windowsill, and you can even set up a reflective screen using simple household aluminum foil. And fourth, immediately halt all fertilization, especially anything high in nitrogen. Nitrogen fuels leafy green growth, which is precisely what we are trying to stop right now. By taking these steps, you won't magically turn an already leggy seedling into the perfect specimen, but you will be able to curb that explosive growth and keep them in a reasonably decent condition until it's safe to transplant them outside. If you are just starting your planting schedule and notice that spring is taking its sweet time, this is actually the perfect moment to choose your seeds wisely. Making the right choice here can be your secret weapon against the lingering cold. Pay close attention to the packaging. Look for key phrases like early maturing or ultra early. These specific varieties and hybrids go from germination to the first harvestable cucumber in just 38 to 45 days. This means that even if you stop planting later, you won't fall far behind on your harvest schedule. Furthermore, breeders have developed specialized cold-tolerant hybrids. They handle temperature swings much better and can continue to develop even when temperatures are relatively low, provided they are above freezing. Look for labels on the packets that say cold resistant or suitable for northern regions. Examples of such popular hybrids include Murashka, Altai, Malchik, Sraspalchik, and German. Also ideal for an unpredictable spring are parthenocarpic hybrids, that is, varieties that do not require bee pollination. During cold and rainy weather, insect activity is low, and standard bee-pollinated varieties might simply drop their blossoms or young fruit. Parthenocarpic types, however, will fruit reliably regardless of the weather. Choosing the right seeds is truly your strategic advantage. Giving your seedlings a proper head start and saving valuable time requires good pre-sowing seed preparation. Don't just toss dry seeds into the soil. Spending a little time prepping them will speed up germination by several days and significantly increase your overall success rate. The first stage is calibration, or sorting. Drop your seeds into a salt solution, about 1 teaspoon of salt per cup of water. Empty or weak seeds will float, while the full, viable seeds will sink. We only keep the ones that sink. Stage 2 is disinfection, or sanitization. Soak the seeds for 20 to 30 minutes in a mild solution of potassium permanganate or a specialized fungicide treatment. This kills any potential surface pathogens. The third and arguably most crucial stage is germination itself. Wrap the seeds in a damp cloth or place them between moist cotton pads. Put them in a sealed container or plastic bag and keep them in a warm spot, ideally between 77 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit. After 2 or 3 days, you will see tiny white roots start to emerge. These pre-sprouted seeds, or those that have already cracked, are now ready to sow directly into your starting mix. They will sprout almost immediately, giving you a 3 to 5 day advantage compared to planting dry seeds. This technique is especially critical when every warm, growing day truly counts. It might seem like a small detail, the type of container and the soil you use, but when you're dealing with seedlings, there are truly no minor details. The health of the roots, and consequently the entire seedling, depends entirely on choosing the right container and the right medium. Cucumbers thrive best in individual pots, ideally holding at least 400 to 500 millilitres. Why is planting them separately so important? Cucumbers absolutely hate being transplanted or having their roots disturbed. Moving them from a shared tray causes massive stress. That's why we sow seeds directly into their own container. The best option is biodegradable peat pots, which allow you to plant the entire pot directly into the garden without disturbing the roots whatsoever. Now let's talk about the growing medium. Avoid using soil dug straight from your garden bed. It tends to be too compact and often harbours pest larvae and disease pathogens. It's much safer to purchase a ready-made specialised potting mix designed specifically for cucumber seedlings. These commercial mixes are light, airy, well-draining, and already contain the necessary starting nutrients. If you prefer mixing your own medium, combine peat, compost, garden loam, and sand in equal proportions. And you must sterilise it first, either by baking it in the oven or drenching it with boiling water mixed with a little potassium permanganate. Quality soil is truly the foundation for developing strong, healthy seedlings. A lot of gardeners, particularly those from the older generation, really live and die by the lunar calendar. They plan every single move around it, planting during the waxing moon today or watering when the sign is Cancer tomorrow. Now, I don't want to step on anyone's toes here, but when you're dealing with an unusually late or drawn-out spring, strictly following that calendar can seriously backfire. Picture this scenario. The calendar tells you today is the absolute best day to sow your cucumbers. So, you dutifully plant them. But outside, it's freezing, and the forecast for the next 4 weeks is grim. What happens? Your seedlings sprout. They get leggy and overgrown, sitting on your windowsill, and you have nowhere to transplant them because the soil is still rock hard or freezing cold. The moon definitely influences many processes here on Earth. We know that. But it cannot magically cancel a frost or warm up the soil for you. That's why your main guide should not be the moon. It must be the sun and the temperature. Use the lunar calendar as a supplementary tool if it gives you peace of mind. For instance, let's say based on our methodology, you determined you need to sow your seeds between May 10th and May 15th. That is the time window where you can check the calendar and pick the luckiest day. But never let it be the deciding factor. The weather conditions always come first. Imagine spending your whole life in a warm apartment, only to be suddenly thrust out into the freezing cold and wind without any warning. Shocking? Absolutely. This is exactly the same shock our seedlings experience. They grow up in perfect, ideal indoor conditions, and then suddenly they are transferred to the garden outdoors. To minimise this stress, there is one mandatory procedure: hardening off. This is the process of gradually acclimatising your plants to outdoor conditions. You should start hardening off 10 to 14 days before your planned transplant date. On the very first day, take the seedlings outside or onto an open balcony for just 1 or 2 hours. Make sure the spot is completely shaded and protected from the wind. On the second day, increase that time to 3 or 4 hours. Then, slowly begin to introduce the plants to direct sunlight, starting with just 15 to 20 minutes. Continue increasing the outdoor time every single day. For the final 2 or 3 days before planting, you can start leaving the seedlings outside overnight, provided the nighttime temperature doesn't drop below 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. Hardened seedlings develop much sturdier stems. The leaves often take on a slight purplish tinge, and they handle the actual transplanting and any subsequent unpredictable weather much better. Do not skip this essential step. Light is absolutely vital for plant growth, and this is especially true for young cucumber seedlings. When light is insufficient, the seedlings inevitably start to stretch, what growers call etiolation. In early spring, especially when the weather is cloudy, the natural light coming through your window is simply inadequate. The daylight hours are still short and the sun lacks intensity. If your goal is high-quality, stocky seedlings, then supplemental lighting is absolutely non-negotiable. The ideal solution is a specialized full-spectrum grow light. These lamps deliver the precise light spectrum plants need for efficient photosynthesis. You should position the lamp directly above your plants, maintaining a height of about 15 to 20 centimeters. Remember to raise the light fixture as your seedlings grow taller. You should provide supplemental light to ensure the plants receive a total of 12 to 14 hours of light per day. This means turning the lamp on early in the morning, several hours before sunrise, and again in the evening, after the sun has set. If you don't have access to a specialized grow light, standard daylight fluorescent tubes are an acceptable alternative. They are less effective, but certainly better than providing no supplemental light at all. Always remember this rule. It is far better to sow your seeds a little later, under optimal light conditions, than to start early, only to have them struggle in the dark. If you've sown your seeds too early and need to slow down the growth of the resulting seedlings, it's essential to completely rethink your watering and feeding schedules. The rule here is simple. Less is more. In cooler conditions and with limited light, seedlings require far less water. Overwatering in this scenario is a guaranteed recipe for fungal issues, especially the dreaded damping off. Roots sitting in constantly wet, cold soil will struggle to breathe and quickly start to rot. Therefore, only water your seedlings once the top 1 or 2 centimeters, about half an inch, of the potting mix feels dry to the touch. Crucially, always use warm, room temperature, pre-settled water. Now, let's talk about feeding. If you started your seeds in a high-quality commercial potting mix, there should be enough nutrients in the soil to last for the first 2 to 3 weeks. If your seedlings are growing too quickly, the best approach is to skip feeding entirely. Nitrogen fertilizers, such as urea or ammonium nitrate, are particularly dangerous during this phase. They encourage rapid, leafy, top growth, which is precisely what we are trying to avoid right now. However, if your seedlings look weak and pale, you can provide them with a balanced fertilizer that has minimal nitrogen. Instead, focus on phosphorus, P, and potassium, K, which are crucial for strong, healthy root development. What happens if you've missed all your planting deadlines? Maybe spring was so cold and drawn out that you never got around to starting your seedlings, and now it's already June. Does that mean you have to go without cucumbers this year? Absolutely not. You always have a plan B, the direct sowing method, planting seeds straight into the garden soil. Yes, you will get your harvest a little later, typically 2 to 3 weeks behind the transplanted seedlings. But on the plus side, you completely avoid the fuss and hassle of raising starts on your windowsill. Cucumbers planted directly in the ground grow much stronger and more robust. Their root systems develop naturally right away, preventing any transplant shock. For direct sowing, you need to wait until the soil is thoroughly warmed up to at least 15 to 17 degrees Celsius, or roughly 60 to 63 degrees Fahrenheit. It's best to pre-sprout your seeds before planting, as we've discussed previously. Sow 2 or 3 seeds per well-watered hole, and once the seedlings emerge, thin them out, leaving only the strongest plant. This method is ideal for warmer, southern regions, but when you have a cold, lingering spring, it can truly save the growing season, even in more temperate zones. In the 21st century, we have access to an incredibly powerful tool that we simply shouldn't ignore: modern weather forecasting services. Don't just rely on the standard weather report on the news for tomorrow. Dive into the long-range forecasts. Of course, they aren't always 100% accurate, but they give you a very reliable picture of the overall trend. There are countless websites and apps available that provide forecasts for 10, 14 days, and sometimes even a month in advance. Pay close attention to the dynamics of the day and night temperatures. If you see stable warming without night frost projected 2 weeks out, that's your starting signal to begin planning. always cross-reference forecasts from several different sources. It's also helpful to look at the historical weather data for your specific location over the past few years. This will help you determine if the current conditions are truly anomalous or if they are simply within the normal expected range for your local climate. Learning how to read and analyse these weather forecasts transforms gardening from a pure lottery into a much more predictable and manageable endeavour. It allows you to be proactive and stay ahead of the curve rather than just reacting to problems after they've already occurred. So, let's wrap things up and go over our final planting checklist. Before you grab those seedling trays and a trowel, make sure you've checked off these critical items. First, your starts should be between 25 and 30 days old. Second, they have 3 to 5 true, dark green leaves and they are not leggy or spindly. Third, your seedlings have completed the full hardening off process, which takes 10 to 14 days. Fourth, you've checked the soil temperature in your planting bed and it consistently registers no lower than 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Fifth, you have studied the 7 to 10 day weather forecast and there is no prediction of late, returning frosts or severe cold snaps, meaning nighttime temperatures should stay above 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If you can confidently check every single box on this list, congratulations! You have done everything right and your seedlings are officially ready to move into their permanent homes. However, if even one item remains unchecked, do not rush. It is always better to wait a few extra days than to lose an entire plant just because you hurried the process. This simple checklist is your insurance against mistakes and the key to ensuring a rich harvest later this season. And just like that, folks, we've tackled what might have seemed like a complicated problem. But in reality, it all boiled down to simple logic and basic math. The most important thing you need to take away from our discussion today is this. When gardening, especially with unpredictable weather, your main guide should never be the calendar, but the actual real-world conditions, soil temperature, the long-term forecast, and the condition of your seedlings themselves. These are the 3 pillars of success. Forget the mentality of, my neighbour is planting, so I should too. Learn to observe, analyse, and count backward. This simple skill will save you a ton of stress and time, and most importantly, it guarantees that your hard work won't go to waste. Instead, you'll be enjoying crunchy, flavourful cucumbers straight from your garden all summer long. I truly hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you did find it useful, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future tips. And now, I have a question for you. Please let me know in the comments what region you're watching from and how spring is treating you this year. Is it spoiling you with warmth, or is it making you wait? Let's share some notes.